In the world of medicine, sometimes the biggest threat is something you can't even see. I'm not talking about a mistake in a chemical formula. I'm talking about the air itself. So, how do you prove that the air in a manufacturing facility is actually sterile? Well, it's a whole lot more complicated than just flipping a switch on a big fan. Let's break down this absolutely critical process of HVAC validation, focusing on two key phases, OQ and PQ. First things first, we've got to understand what's at stake here. When you're making life-saving drugs, a little bit of contamination isn't just a small problem, it's a disaster. It can put patients at risk and cost a company millions, maybe even billions of dollars. And the number one way that contamination gets around? You guessed it, the air. And this really gets to a core idea you have to wrap your head around in this industry. The air isn't just air. You have to treat it like a raw material with the same level of control and seriousness as any other active ingredient going into a medicine. It's a fundamental part of the process. And this is what really brings the risk home. You know that tiny little speck of dust you might see floating in a beam of sunlight? In a pharmaceutical cleanroom, that speck could be carrying microbes that ruin an entire massive batch of product. The cost, both financially and in terms of human health, is just astronomical. That's why we have to be so sure these systems work perfectly. So how do we even begin to prove it? Well, that brings us to our first phase, which is called Operational Qualification, or OQ for short. Honestly, the best way to think about OQ is like a dress rehearsal for the HVAC system. It's basically a series of intense stress tests designed to make sure the equipment can actually do what the engineers promised it could do. So at its heart, OQ is all about checking the basic fundamental functions. Does it turn on? Does it turn off? Can it hit the right air speeds? Can it maintain the correct pressure? We're testing its capabilities in a perfect, pristine environment, and we're pushing it to its absolute limits just to see if it holds up. And during OQ, we follow a very strict playbook. First, we measure the airflow coming out of every single filter to make sure it's perfectly uniform. Then we check the pressure differentials. This is a huge deal because you always need air flowing out of the clean areas, never in. We even do these cool smoke tests to find leaks in the filters that are literally the size of a pinhole. And my favorite part, we deliberately try to break things. We'll cut the power or block a sensor just to make sure every single alarm and safety feature kicks in exactly when it's supposed to. Now, here's the crucial detail. All of this testing happens in what we call the at-rest state. That means the room is built, it's sterile, the HVAC system is running full blast, but there's nobody in there. No equipment moving around, no production happening. It's the absolute best-case ideal scenario. And that, of course, leads to the big question, right? It's great that the system works perfectly in an empty room. But what happens when you introduce the chaos of real life? People walking around, machines generating heat, doors opening and closing. And that is where our second phase comes in, Performance Qualification, or PQ. So if OQ is the dress rehearsal, then PQ is opening night. It's the live show with a full audience. This is the ultimate real-world test. The whole point of PQ is totally different from OQ. We're not asking, can the system work anymore? We already know it can. Now we're asking, can it consistently work under the stress of a normal day? And that word, consistently, is everything. You see, PQ is a long game. We're monitoring things like particle counts, temperature, and humidity, but not just for a few minutes. We're tracking this stuff over days, sometimes even weeks, to see the trends. We deliberately test during the worst-case scenarios, like when the room is packed with people or right in the middle of a chaotic shift change. We even have to prove the system works just as well on a blazing hot, humid day in August as it does on a freezing cold, dry day in January. And unlike OQ, PQ is always done in the operational state. That means the room is fully staffed, all the machinery is running and kicking off heat, and we're simulating the real production process. It's the ultimate test of whether the system can perform under real pressure. Okay, so we've walked through the dress rehearsal and we've been to opening night. Now let's put them side by side. This is where the difference between OQ and PQ really becomes crystal clear. It really just boils down to the fundamental question each phase is trying to answer. OQ asks, does this thing have the basic functions to work correctly, even when we push it to its limits? But PQ asks a totally different question. Can this system maintain a stable, consistent environment over the long haul in the real world? This table just lays it all out perfectly. Look at the focus. OQ is all about functionality and limits. PQ is all about consistency and stability. The room state? OQ is done at rest, totally empty, while PQ is operational, with everything running. And the duration is a big one. OQ is a series of quick, short-term tests. PQ is a long-term study where you're analyzing trends. For the regulators, OQ proves the system was built right, while PQ proves that you can actually control your process day in and day out. So after all that, what's the final verdict? Which one's more important, OQ or PQ? Well, the answer is, it's a trick question. You absolutely positively cannot have one with the other. They are two halves of the same whole. If you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this right here. OQ proves the system can do the job. It's the proof of its capability. But PQ proves that it consistently does the job under pressure. That's the proof of its reliability. And really, this is the bottom line. If you skip a step or if you don't do both of them right, then your multi-million-dollar cleanroom isn't actually a cleanroom. It's not validated, it's not compliant, and you can't trust it to make safe products. It's really just a very, very expensive box with a fan. So, completing OQ and PQ gets you a validated system that's ready to go today. But here's the thing. Validation isn't something you do once and then forget about. It's an ongoing process. And that leaves us with one final thought. Your system is proven to work right now, but what are you doing to make sure it's ready for next year's audit? Because trust me, that next audit is always right around the corner.